Houthi challenge. USS Abraham Lincoln for Iran. U.S. Navy responds brutally at 3:17 a.m. on February 3rd. The Arabian Sea was no longer just water and darkness. It became a chessboard, lit by fire. What seemed like chaos was, in truth, a perfectly timed strategy. On the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, routine night operations were underway. Radar rotations were steady. Watch officers were calm. Then the SPY-6 array aboard the USS Frank E. Peterson Jr. destroyer detected something that instantly changed the tone inside the Combat Information Center. And more than 40 surface-skimming objects erupted from the direction of Yemen's coastline at once. They weren't climbing. They weren't broadcasting. They were hugging the sea at less than 5 meters, racing forward at nearly Mach 0.95. That alone was alarming. But what truly unsettled the electronic warfare teams was their radar signature. Too small and erratic to cleanly classify as cruise missiles. Too large and too fast to be conventional drones. For 12 critical seconds, an eternity in missile defense, the Aegis system hesitated. 12 seconds where algorithms tried to decide what they were seeing. 12 seconds where uncertainty created opportunity. And opportunity is what this entire operation was built around. The strike group commander suddenly faced a brutal equation at launch SM-6. Interceptors and risk exposing electronic waveforms while wasting multi-million-dollar missiles on ambiguous targets, or rely on electronic countermeasures and gamble with over 5,000 lives aboard the carrier? The decision was made to avoid immediate missile launch. MCON status was tightened. Active emissions were reduced. Instead of lighting up the sea with radar energy, the fleet would fight smarter. 2 F-35C fighters already airborne from the Black Knight Squadron were redirected to intercept. Up above the black water, those stealth fighters became the fleet's eyes and claws. Without full reliance on shipboard radar guidance, they activated their secure data-sharing network. Each aircraft began passively building its own picture of the battlefield, sharing target tracks invisibly between them. Then the night ignited. IM-9X infrared missiles streaked outward, locking onto engine heat signatures. One after another, the leading wave of targets detonated or spiraled into the sea. The F-35 pilots pressed aggressively, diving to engage with 25mm cannon fire. Tungsten rounds slicing through composite airframes, moving at nearly 1,000 kilometers per hour. Within 95 seconds, 35 of the 40 red contacts disappeared from the tactical screen. Inside the command center, relief surged. It appeared to be a textbook defense, a clean interception, a preserved missile inventory, a demonstration of air dominance. But then came the transmission that froze the room. Splash confirmed. Negative secondary explosion. No warhead detonation. No warhead, just composite fragments. Small jet engines. Empty shells. They hadn't destroyed cruise missiles. They had destroyed decoys. The realization landed hard. The first wave wasn't meant to sink a carrier. It was meant to trigger a reaction, to force defensive fire, to generate debris, to create thermal chaos. Carbon fiber wreckage, half-burned fuel, metallic chaff. These remnants now cluttered the battle space. Infrared sensors were overwhelmed with heat spots. Radar returns multiplied into confusion. The sky was intentionally dirtied. And that was when the real threat moved. From within the interference, 3 low-profile cruise missiles emerged. PIV 351 class weapons, designed not for spectacle, but penetration. Unlike the decoys, these were quiet. Their sensors were passive. Their altitude locked at just 3 meters above the waves. It wasn't a head-on engagement. It was a coordinated flanking maneuver. Sea-skimming missiles exploit physics. The curvature of the Earth hides them from radar until the final moments. Long-range interceptors struggle against such low-altitude profiles. Reaction time collapses to seconds. the USS Frank E. Peterson Jr. now faced a nightmare scenario. Its SPY-6 radar was partially obscured by clutter and horizon limitations. The final defensive layer, the close-in weapon system, activated. The phalanx roared to life, 6 barrels spun, unleashing 4,500 rounds per minute in a desperate wall of tungsten. One missile detonated at approximately 400 meters. A bright orange fireball erupted against the Black Sea. But physics is merciless. Even after detonation, the missile's mass, momentum, and fragmentation energy continued forward. And shrapnel and shock waves hammered the destroyer. Electrical systems sparked. Metal screamed. The starboard SPY-6 array was torn apart. The carrier survived untouched, but the shield was scarred, and the adversary had data. This was never about sinking a $13 billion aircraft carrier. It was about probing, stress testing, finding blind spots in one of the most advanced naval defense systems ever built. To understand why this attack happened, we have to step back. Iran was under immense pressure. Domestic unrest had escalated into a crisis of legitimacy. Thousands had died in protests. Economic strain was deepening. International scrutiny was rising. In response, the USS Abraham Lincoln strike group was repositioned toward the Gulf as a visible deterrent, a floating fortress projecting American resolve. For Tehran and its regional allies, doing nothing would project weakness. Enter the Houthis. In the valleys of Yemen, a coordinated launch sequence began hours earlier. No radar sites activated, no early warning emissions. Target data was preloaded via reconnaissance updates. The operation relied on silence, deception, and timing. 40 decoy drones were launched not to win, but to shape the battlefield. Their erratic flight paths forced prediction algorithms into confusion. Their low altitude exploited radar geometry. Their job was simple: saturate, distract, overwhelm. And for a moment, they succeeded. When the real missiles struck and damaged the destroyer's radar, something more valuable than metal was extracted: electronic intelligence. By observing the fleet's response patterns, timing, emissions, and intercept decisions, the attackers gained insight into how Aegis behaves under stress. That data is gold in modern warfare. But the engagement didn't end there. Satellite monitoring and passive electronic scans soon detected weak uplink frequencies, signals guiding missile coordination from inland command trucks. 2 F-35s shifted roles from defense to hunt. They shut down active emissions and relied on passive electronic warfare systems to triangulate the source. A faint 370 MHz signal blinked from a canyon over 100 miles inland. The coordinates were relayed. An EA-18G Growler joined the fight, unleashing focused jamming energy into the command frequency. Control screens inside Yemeni valleys reportedly went dark, but the Houthis made one final move. Without external guidance, the remaining missiles were switched to inertial mode and launched in a saturation barrage. 28 weapons fired in blind defiance. The airspace ignited again. To end it, the F-35 pilot known as Viper dove into hostile territory at low altitude. Anti-aircraft guns waited. Shoulder-fired missiles launched. Tracer fire stitched the sky. The pilot locked onto the command vehicle, attempting to hide within cave cover. The 25mm cannon opened fire, carving a path of sparks. An AIM-9X followed. The explosion confirmed the destruction of the control node. Moments later, Viper evaded incoming missiles with flares and a violent vertical climb, narrowly escaping as one detonation shook his aircraft. At 5 a.m., dawn broke over the Gulf of Aden. All remaining inertially guided missiles fell harmlessly into the sea. The USS Abraham Lincoln sailed on. Operationally, the United States held the field. The carrier survived. The strike group remained intact. The forward command element in Yemen was destroyed. Dozens of drones and multiple cruise missiles were lost by the attackers. But strategically, the situation is more complex. The destroyer now required at least 72 hours of repair for its damaged SPY-6 radar. A $2 billion warship bore visible scars, and adversaries had witnessed that saturation combined with low-tech physical interference could degrade even advanced systems. This is the evolution of anti-access doctrine. Not brute force, not singular superweapons, but layered deception, economic asymmetry, and psychological pressure. A 10-second clip of an explosion near a U.S. destroyer spreads fast in the digital age. Narratives move quicker than fleets. From the Red Sea and Arabian Sea are no longer just transit corridors for commerce. They are laboratories of modern naval warfare, where cheap drones and cruise missiles test billion-dollar defenses. For sailors aboard the Abraham Lincoln, the lesson was immediate and personal. They had passed their first major test in this theater. But they also understood something sobering. The next wave could be larger, the decoys could be smarter, the saturation could be heavier, and the margin for error could be thinner. In Washington, official statements emphasized deterrence and strength. The message was clear. Any further targeting of American assets would invite overwhelming retaliation. Yet beneath the rhetoric lies a deeper reality. Modern warfare is no longer about invulnerability. It is about resilience under saturation. The Houthis didn't need to win outright. Victory, in the conventional sense, was never the objective. They didn't need to sink a fleet or seize control of the sea lanes. They needed to expose a crack, however small, in the armor. They needed to demonstrate vulnerability. And in that narrow but powerful sense, they achieved something. They showed that even the most advanced naval shield is not invincible. That when pressure comes, not as a single blow, but in relentless waves, the calculus changes. Decoys first, to light up the radar screens and drain attention. Real weapons second, slipping through the clutter at the worst possible moment. Electronic interference throughout, distorting signals, delaying decisions, forcing hesitation where seconds mean survival. It was not about overwhelming strength. It was about layered strain, about stretching response times, complicating targeting solutions, and forcing a sophisticated defense to fight on multiple planes at once: kinetic, electronic, psychological. And in doing so, they sent a message far beyond the battlefield. Even the most advanced systems can be tested, stressed, and momentarily bent when the attack is patient, coordinated, and designed to exploit the smallest margins of delay. This engagement will now be studied by military planners worldwide. How long did Aegis hesitate? How quickly were emissions adjusted? How effectively did air assets integrate with naval defense? How costly was the exchange ratio? Because the future of naval warfare will hinge on those answers. As the sun rose that morning, the sea returned to deceptive calm. No smoke columns lingered. No wreckage floated near the carrier. From a distance, nothing appeared changed. But in command rooms, in defense ministries, and in intelligence centers across the region, data was being analyzed minute by minute. This was not a decisive battle. It was a probe, a rehearsal, a warning, and perhaps the first chapter of a much larger confrontation still forming beyond the horizon. The calm that followed felt fragile, because everyone involved understood that the next test may not grant 12 seconds of hesitation. If you found this analysis valuable and want deeper breakdowns of the strategies shaping today's conflicts, support the channel by subscribing and turning on notifications. We'll continue cutting through the noise to examine what really happens behind the headlines and what it means for the battles yet to come.